All right, here is another useful example, number 13, fiscal policy and exchange rates. We continue with Monique Kwan and her analysis of the foreign exchange rate outlook for selected countries. She examines a DM country that has a high degree of capital mobility and a floating rate currency regime. Kwan notices that although the current outstanding stock of government debt is low as a percentage of GDP, it is rising sharply as a result of expansionary fiscal policy. So high levels of debt are not a concern right now, but they are becoming a concern very soon. Moreover, projections for the government debt to GDP ratio point to further increases well into the future. Further increase in what? In the level of debt relative to GDP. Kwan uses the Mundell, Fleming, and portfolio balance models to form an opinion about both the short run and long run implications for the DM country's exchange rate. What we are going to do here is combine two models. And very simplistically, the Mundell-Fleming model predicts what happens in the short term, whereas this other model, the portfolio balance model, explains what happens in the long run. I'm going to touch on this briefly and then we look at the questions. So when you have an expansive fiscal policy, what does the Mundell-Fleming model do? And we saw this in earlier examples also. There is an increase in the real interest rate differential. In other words, when a country is pursuing an expansive fiscal policy, in the short run, there are investment opportunities, the real interest rates are high, so money flows in. When money flows in, the capital appreciates. Here I want to clear a confusion. Many students ask this question. In earlier parts of this reading, we talked about the fact that countries with high interest rates actually see a depreciation in currency. Here we seem to be saying the opposite. Here we seem to be saying that high interest rates cause the currency to strengthen. Why? The answer is that here we are talking about real interest rates, and in the earlier sections where we talked about the various parity relationships, there we were talking about nominal interest rates. Clearly, in a country where real interest rates are high, money will flow in. When money flows in the short run, the exchange rate will strengthen, right? So this is what the Mundell-Fleming model says in the short run. What does the other model say? The other model is the portfolio balance model. If the country keeps pursuing an expansionary fiscal policy, what will happen to the level of debt? The government debt will keep going up. If the government debt keeps going up, what are the two things that are likely to happen? One scenario, which is a monetary policy response, is that the central bank might monetize debt. This is a fancy term for a straightforward concept. If the government owes lots of money, it can just increase the money supply, print money, and pay off the debt. What does that do to the currency? If the central bank is increasing money supply, then as we've discussed earlier, the currency will lose value, it will depreciate. Another scenario is that you can anticipate, you as an investor can anticipate that clearly the country cannot keep pursuing an expansive fiscal policy. So you can anticipate that the government will change its stance and pull back. So move from an expansive fiscal policy to a restrictive fiscal policy. If that happens, then in the long run, the currency will come down. Okay, so this is called the portfolio balance model. Now let's look at the questions. Over the short run, Kwan is most likely to expect what? Which model do you use in the short run? The Mundell-Fleming model. What is the fiscal policy looking like? The fiscal policy is expansive. And what did we just say? With an expansive fiscal policy, what do we expect in the short run? So the correct answer is appreciation of the currency. Over the medium term, so we can say medium term to long term, the country's government debt becomes harder to finance. Kwan would be most likely to expect what? A fiscal policy that will be more accommodative, and you need to understand this vocabulary. What does an accommodative fiscal policy mean? This is almost synonymous with expansionary, right? So is the government policy, the fiscal policy, likely to be accommodative and expansive in the long run? No. Mark-to-market value of debt will increase. This looks questionable. Monetary policy will become more accommodative. That is true. When we say that the debt will be monetized, what did that mean? That meant that money supply will increase. If money supply increases, that is a more accommodative monetary policy. So the best answer is C. All right, coming to question 3 now. Assume that the DM country's debt becomes harder to finance and there is no change in monetary policy. Kwan is most likely to expect that over the long term there will be a fiscal policy response that would lead to what? So what we do here is go back and look at the Mundell-Fleming model. What we are saying here is that the monetary policy is not changing. So there is no monetization of debt, but there will be a change in the fiscal stance. What is the change in the fiscal stance? The fiscal policy will move from being more accommodative into becoming more restrictive. And a restrictive fiscal policy means that investment opportunities are lower and the currency depreciates. So therefore, the correct answer is this. We have a decline in yield not because of monetary policy, but because of a more restrictive fiscal policy. And the currency obviously depreciates.